Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Business of Science, a podcast where we explore the ideas, decisions, and shifts shaping science dependent industries at their early stages. Each episode features conversations with professionals working across business, policy, and innovation to better understand where things are headed. My name is Rohan Goel, and today I'm excited to be joined by Vanita Gangwal, who does extensive environmental work. She's an environmental commissioner in Milburn Township and a member of the Board of Trustees at the Nature Conservancy. The environmental field and sustainability are changing in many ways, and Mrs. Gangwal's perspective will offer an insightful look into where the industry is moving next. Welcome, Ms. Gangwal. I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you, Rohan, and thanks for having me. And thanks for that nice introduction. I think you're absolutely right that the most of the environmental work I do is in the capacity of locally right here in Melbourne as an environmental commissioner, and then in my role as a trustee with the New Jersey chapter of the Nature Conservancy. So I don't know how much you know about the Nature Conservancy, but it is the world's largest conservation organization. It's in over 70 countries in the world, as well as all 50 states in the US. I've been on the board of New Jersey chapter for last 8 years, and I also support their work in India. So from that perspective, I get a pretty good view into what's happening in conservation space, both globally as well as nationally in the US, as well as right here in New Jersey. And the beauty about the Nature Conservancy is that this organization actually was started by scientists. It was just a few scientists who got together and who were passionate about conserving a piece of land which had high ecological value. And Nature Conservancy really started from that, right? So that scientific ethos hasn't changed. Nature Conservancy, whatever it does, it's very science led and it is research oriented. So it is not one of your nonprofit organization who means well but don't know really how to come up with solutions that scale, solutions that are lasting, right? So that's the Nature Conservancy. Now here in Melbourne, yes, Environmental Commission, I've been part of it for last 2 years, but actually my environmental work started here in 2019 in earnest when I co-founded a local group called Melbourne for Climate Action. And now this is our seventh year running, and the citizen volunteer group has really advocated for a lot of sustainability policies, both in a local community as well as our schools. So we'll talk about it a little bit more. But my day job is really I'm a partner with KPMG.
Mhm.
And my actual profession does not necessarily have any relationship to my environmental work. I'm a tax partner who serves asset management, big financial firms. But you know what? Money makes this world go round. So in that role, I do see, where and how people are investing in the future, right? I do see what businesses are betting on, right? I do see like things like AI, energy, or new technologies, and which where the finance is going, right? Where the money is being spent. So even though my job is not necessarily in like ESG, environmental sustainability, at KPMG, I see how businesses are evolving and what's going to scale, right? So I think my three of these hats that I wear, they give me a pretty good view of what's happening in the world at various different levels. And one last thing I'll say is that I'm a business person from a work perspective, and then I work with nonprofits. But where my advocacy work comes from is that I studied public policy at school. So I really wanted to be in the uh, public sector or nonprofit. So I studied public policy for my undergrad, and I'm a big believer in the power of grassroots action and people coming together to make change happen. So that's a bit about me.
That's really interesting how you get to see it from so many different perspectives and so many different organizations. So,
Yeah.
what new strategies or tools have organizations started to use to reduce energy or environmental impact more effectively?
So I think, if I think about KPMG, for example, right? So any organization, big organization of KPMG size, they all set these 2030 goals. I don't know if you have heard about this term, but 2030 was a very ambitious target that many people set. 2030 vision, 2030 goals, 30 by 30, you hear many different versions of it. So KPMG set its own standards for, reducing our emissions in half by 2030 compared to, I believe 2019 was the year they were comparing to. We personally, I can see things happening in a way that we just recently moved into a new building in Manhattan and to Manhattan West. And yeah, it's state of the art building with many sustainability features built into it, from having LED, the LEED certifications for how the building itself was designed for energy conservation and other things, to just simple things like now we have actual cutlery in office with dishwashers and other things. So people, our thousands of employees on a daily basis, are not creating, use and throw waste every single day. So those are some very little examples. But I think, how KPMG is leveraging AI, for example, is that AI is now built into many. We can measure everything. So measuring our environmental impact from how our employees travel to where our meetings are happening, or what kind of KPMG swag we give out. Everything now goes through some kind of analysis to make sure that our carbon footprint or our waste footprint is minimized so that we can achieve that 2030 goal, right? But beyond, broader looking beyond KPMG, again, from my perspective, I think the pace of change is very slow, right? Across the world, I wish the world woke up to the climate emergency that we've been in for last 25 years. But what I do feel is that it's starting to resonate now. I do think with more extreme weather events happening all around us, that there is a much better and recognition, on the parts of people, generally speaking, or local governments, or your businesses, because whether politicians say anything they may want, but when you see your insurance bill and you see your insurance premiums go up and you see you're not going to be able to get insured because of flood or wildfire risk, then it becomes very real for people. So I think that changes I'm seeing are, one is, yes, many companies by their own accord adopted these 2030 goals, and whether they have fulfilled them fully or not, but certainly progress has been made.
Given that you're seeing that this is becoming more relevant, which new strategies or tools have, which sectors or industries do you think are making the fastest progress in efficiency or environmental responsibility, and what's driving that progress?
Yeah, so I think, from a tools or strategies perspective, just going back to there. So one thing we talked about, so if I relate what I said earlier to tools, so one is, you can't change something that you can't measure, right? So better measurement, whether it has come because of consulting firms like KPMG coming up with ESG, design and tools for other businesses to adopt, or with AI. So better measurement is a tool. Then electrification, as you know, with the green energy or renewable energy, is the whole rage, right? I mean, so that's happening everywhere that we see. But then I'll also relate it to what Nature Conservancy specializes in. So if you think about nature itself is a solution in itself, right? So that's what Nature Conservancy focuses on, that how can we come up with nature-based solutions to fight these huge climate change problems, right? So for example, if you ever have an opportunity, if you go to Jersey Shore, and I can give you reference to it, but Nature Conservancy does amazing work on rebuilding the marshes on the in coastal New Jersey. And if you think about marshes, they're like sponges, right? They absorb storm surge and reduce flooding. I don't know if you recall Sandy. It was in 2012. You must have been very young at that time. But we had major flooding, right? And the entire Jersey Shore had to be rebuilt. So if these marshes are better protected, they act as a natural barrier, right? And this is not just saving nature for itself. This is saving our coastal communities and those beautiful, beach houses, which are worth millions of dollars. So it definitely, it directly impacts our economy, right? Our local economy and people's pockets, right? So using nature as a solution to fight climate change problems is another, tool or technology that I'm seeing. Now, where is moving the fastest? Or it's clearly AI, right? I mean, and that genie is out of the bottle. Everybody is trying to outdo each other. So both in tech and energy, things are just moving very, very fast, and it's just intense competition. So everybody is trying to build the next and the biggest data center, and AI uses a lot of electricity. So guess what? Whether our government believes we should go back to coal or not, these businessmen know, these business people know that they need to be investing in cleaner power and energy to power their AI data centers, right? So whether they are doing it because they clearly want to save our environment, or they are they think green, or they're sustainable in their way of living or not, but they just know that's a business reality, right? So AI and energy are both, I believe, are the sectors where you're seeing the biggest change. One more thing is that in energy space, we'll also see that it's not just the electric vehicles, right? But if you bring it down to something very local, so I don't know if you heard about it. I know you go to Pingri, but you live in Melbourne. And come this April, you're going to see that we have a new ordinance in place. And that ordinance is that we have a seasonal ban on gas powered leaf blowers in our town now.
Oh,
So people can only use gas powered leaf blowers only during certain times of the year when you have a lot of leaves falling on the ground, and then you cannot deal with that with an electric blower. But previously, what used to happen was that people were, if you remember any summers here, a quiet summer afternoon, and you would hear those
yeah.
leaf blowers just going off, right?
Yeah.
And those leaf blowers are extremely, extremely polluting. I think there's data and statistics out there that running a gas leaf blower is equivalent to. So, that little change, right? So that's another electrification example, that we have so many electric power tools that can replace those old gas or coal power tools. Now, of course, where the energy is coming from, that's where the energy grid needs to be on renewable sources as well, right? But for now, we are seeing those trends evolve in every sphere of life.
So it seems like AI is impacting every industry everywhere. So given
Whether
that
we like
that's
it or not, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
and given that that's like a recent development, what emerging trends or developments should people pay attention to, you think, that'll develop over the next 5 or 10 years in environmental work and sustainability?
Yeah, so I think, one is again relating back to AI and energy. What we'll see is that, we are going to explore every and all possible sources of clean energy, energy, period, right? But, you'll see nuclear, geothermal, long duration storage, hybrid systems, whatever it is that we are going to explore any and all of it. So nuclear power, you're going to start to hear about it again. Okay, so that's in US. Then second is, as I said before, nature itself becoming a technology, because resilience is a priority and climate mitigation is a reality now, right? So you're going to see that, whether we are creating mini forests or stormwater management in our own town, in our own town, or you know using permeable sidewalk so that your downtown doesn't get flooded. So you're going to start to see a lot of these things become part of the new wave of construction and other things that you see around yourself, right? Now, reality is that we have known about these solutions and a lot of these technology solutions for a long time. For example, there are so many bioplastics available, right? But we still continue to produce trillions of tons of throwaway plastic every year, even though we know that plastic is seeping into practically every aspect of our life, right? Our land, our water, our air, it's in our bodies, it's on the top of Himalayas, it's in the deepest trenches of the ocean, it's everywhere. And we do have bioplastics. So, but the adoption hasn't been quick enough, right? So I think, but you'll start to see that people will start to realize that, these problems we need to, we are at a point where we just have to start utilizing these technologies and solutions. And I think AI is going to be a big driver of that as well. And then third is, again, I'll come back from a KPMG perspective and accounting and my compliance role is that disclosure and data integrity. Again, AI plays a role with that also. You can measure things better. You can have a much better way of measuring the problem as well as coming up with which solutions work better or not. And then second thing is, like, I think US hopefully maybe not in the next 3 years, but hopefully there will be a change driven by young people like yourself who can make or break new, political parties or governments and political candidates, that climate and sustainability reporting will become important in the US. That has been pushed off far too long, right? I think Europe is ahead of us. Within US, California is ahead in terms of what kind of reporting companies are required to produce for climate sustainability. But hopefully that will become part and parcel of every business. That's the price of running a business, that you need to comply.
So it seems like this is like a growing industry that needs to become a priority. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of people will start like being interested in this and trying to pursue this industry. So for students and young professionals interested in this field, what skills or experiences do you think will matter most going forward?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting that your podcast is business and science. Again, both extremely important things to make any real change happen in this world, right? So, but the science has the power of doing great things, right? Coming up with great solutions for this world. But at the same time, every solution can be used for good means or bad means, right? So that's where intention comes into picture, right? That what are you going to use these solutions for? For example, AI, again, as we have been talking, that we can't deny the impact of AI in the current world, but it is an energy guzzler, right? It uses water. It is taking up huge spaces, land, right? So it's like about policy decisions on, would you like it if tomorrow there's a huge AI data center built right in our South Mountain Conservancy? If somebody just starts to do that, so would we want that to happen or not, right? So balancing those things is very important. So how do students be part of that kind of conversation? So I do think is that while AI can help solve problems faster, right? But we need to really focus on where the policy incentives and political will align to make changes happen, right? So, for example, we talked about the bioplastics. They are available, but why aren't we using them? Because there's no political will, right? Second is, for example, another local example I'll give you. Are you an athlete? You
Yeah.
play any field sports?
Yeah, I run cross country.
You run. Okay. So you don't technically use like a field where, soccer, but, where there's a proposal in Melbourne town where our rec department as our BOE is proposing two artificial turf fields, right? They are talking about replacing current natural grass fields, converting them with artificial turf. So both in my capacity as a Melbourne Climate Action local volunteer and environmental commissioner, we are very concerned about this, right? Because what is an artificial turf? It is actually a carpet of plastic, right?
Mhm.
Which is going to replace something which is natural. It will be replaced by artificial turf. It will stay there for 10 years, and the only thing you can do with it is to throw it in landfills at the end of it. But while it is there for those 10 years, it's going to, with increasingly warm summers, it's going to cause heat issues. It's going to cause runoff in our water table. It's going to cause PFAS, just toxic fumes. So there's just so many concerns. And the question is, with so much technological innovation, right? There are hybrid fields, there are better management of natural turf fields. Why are we going with the solution, right? So again, the problem is that people have gotten used to thinking in a certain way, and we always think about development in terms of, oh, we can only measure that we're going to have more playable hours because artificial turfs are supposedly more stable, right? But what about everything else? Now let's use AI to measure everything else. Let's really do a proper pros and cons analysis, right? So that's like an example of where, while students like yourself who can be great with AI and science, coming up with new solutions, but you'll find that how are those solutions being used, or if they're even being used or not, that will only happen if you engage yourself in local action, policy, you raise your hand and speak out, right? So that's at the personal level, but I think bigger picture is, no matter what you do, right? Think about nature, sustainability, environment from a systems thinking perspective, because it's all interconnected. We are part of nature. right? Humans are part of nature. Climate and sustainability are never one variable problems. There are just so many things that can impact it both in a negative way and a positive way. So you really need to understand trade-offs, carbon versus water, doing something quicker like artificial turf versus community impact, or cost versus resilience. So, in nature, for example, one thing is you have to think about how nature designs itself. Everything is circular, there's cycle, and there's no waste in nature, right? Everything becomes something else and part of nature again, right?
Yeah.
So circular design. I don't know if you've heard that term.
Yeah.
So, right. So I think that is very, very important. So having that understanding both from a intellectual academic perspective, but philosophically as well. And I think I can speak to you from a perspective of Eastern philosophy, right? Which sort of teaches us humans that it's not a human centric world. We are just part of a bigger whole. So if we start to use that perspective in the way, whatever you may do in life, right? You can choose any profession. That what you do day to day will impact the environment around you, right? So have that circularity in mind, have that, connected whole in mind and systems thinking, right? So I think that would be good.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was so interesting.